we're seeing is a real difference in terms of those students who received the transparent instruction and those who didn't. So you might be wondering, what did that look like? What does that transparent instruction look like? Here is exactly what we asked the teachers in the study to do. We said, before students do any work in your course, please discuss with them these three things: purpose, task, and criteria. You'll notice that purpose, task, and criteria is the way I framed this whole session. But in terms of purpose, we wanted for teachers and students to talk specifically about what skills would the student practice by doing this particular assignment. What knowledge would the student gain by doing this assignment? And how do those have any long-term relevance for the student? How are they problem-centered? How do they apply to anything that matters in the student's life long-term? Then we asked teachers and students to talk about tasks. What should the students do and how should they do it? Not to give away all the answers, but to help students focus their effort and their time on producing high-quality work of the type that teachers expect, to keep them from turning down a wrong or unproductive track. Finally, we asked the teachers to share criteria for success, not only in the form of a checklist, but also in the form of examples. Because how would a first-year or first-generation student from an underperforming public high school ever know what excellence would look like on a chemistry lab report if they had never seen that before? So we really wanted teachers and students to use the checklist, compare it against a sample piece of work, and talk about where students saw this criterion happening in the sample.
Marianne?
Yes.
There are a couple of questions, actually the three that came in, and I know we're going to have some time, but I'm wondering if maybe we could pause for a second. There may be some, a quick way that you can answer some of them. The first was, how do you determine how much transparency is evident?
Right. So what we did in these, in this and since, we found where, and this is how the statistician team helped, but we asked them to find a point at which the classes seem to fall into two groups in terms of the amount of transparency, more versus less, and we identified a specific cutoff point. So 3.1 or 2 out of 4 was our specific cutoff point for how we divided groups into more versus less. But the way that we even got that measure in the first place was that we had 9 survey questions on an end-of-term survey that asked students about their learning experience. Now that end-of-term survey that all the students took contained 44 questions about the students' learning experience. These questions that the students would be equipped to answer because they'd be the experts on their learning experience. And 9 of those survey questions were specifically designed by a survey designer to capture purpose, task, and criteria, and the degree of transparency around those. So 3 questions focused on the purpose of the assignment, 3 on the task, 3 on the criteria. We then took the mean response by each student to those 9 questions to determine the amount of transparency the student felt she or he was receiving in the course. And then we took all the students in the course and made that a mean measure of transparency for that specific course.
Yeah. Now you have, you'll have references later so that people can go dig in if they.
Yes.
Yes. So the results you'll be able to get those results. We'll have a link for that. And then there was just a question for clarification. The retention rate data are confusing to me. Could you go over those again?
I sure can. So a lot of institutions, especially public institutions that rely on state money, like University of Nevada, Las Vegas, they will track the retention rate for a student who is a first-time full-time freshman in the fall of one year. Are they still there the fall of the second year? And that is a measure in IPEDS. It's a measure that many institutions across the country share. It's a standardized measure that you can look up in the National Center for Education Statistics. Right. And each institution tends to track that for themselves as well as sharing it with the federal government. And so what I was trying to point out in this particular slide was that the average retention rate for a UNLV first-time full-time freshman student in the fall of 2014, who then comes back the fall of 2015, that was 74% in the fall of 2015, so exactly a year ago right now. For the students who received the treatment, who told us, according to those 9 survey questions, that they were receiving transparently designed assignment and transparent instruction. Students who understood the purposes, tasks, and criteria before they did any work. Those students were retained at a 90% rate, as compared with the 74% average just at UNLV, just at my institution. The reason we didn't track them across all 7 institutions is that we didn't have the foresight to obtain Institutional Review Board permission from every one of those 7 institutions to track who the students were. So we couldn't go back and then see if those exact students were still there in the fall. The only way we could do that was for the one institution where I was, where we could quickly get IRB approval in time for that.
Good, and we will have some time at the end if to pursue any of these questions. I guess I should say we have the time open after the event ends, so you can stick around and unmute yourself and ask Marianne some more questions if we don't have enough time at the Q&A. But thanks. So I think we're okay. We can go back to where you were.
Okay, so this is where I was, which was right where we thought we'd pause for questions.
Yep, good.
Then now I wanted to walk you through the experience that many of the faculty at institutions around the country have when they go through this process or a workshop on how do you design a transparent assignment? How do you make these assignments relevant and important and clear and understandable to students? And so these slides, I'm basically going to send to you, or actually Susan will send to you, along with links to publications when we're finished today.
Yep.
But I'm going to now walk you through a set of slides that appear in your set of slides that will appear in between this big giant red box and the next time you see a big giant red box. Okay. And these are going to be the resources for faculty and instructors, where you could even use these slides at your own institutions to walk faculty through the kind of preparatory process that we offered the faculty in the study. So the first thing we do is we show them, where does the concept of transparent instruction come from in other people's published research? And lucky you don't need to listen to me walk through those 6 categories of other people's research about the concept of transparency. But Susan will indeed share this with you after.
Yep.
Then we ask teachers, after they've taken on all of that research background, to apply it to the design of assignments. And they don't feel quite ready to do that because, like anyone, you hear it, you're not quite ready to do it until you can see it. So we show them some examples. And we walk them through examples of sample assignments, some of which come from our study, that fell into the less transparent category, and some from our study that fell into the more transparent category. And we asked them to then discuss as a whole group the purposes, tasks, and criteria of those assignments and talk about the relative clarity of those in the more and less transparent examples that we provide. And I thought maybe you'd want to see what one of those examples looks like. So here's a piece of what we ask teachers to do in this workshop, and I'll give you a chance just to try it out. So I'm going to ask you to look for only the purpose of the assignment I'm about to show you on the next screen. Remember, the purpose has 2 parts. The first is, what skills will the students practice from doing this? And the second is, what knowledge will the student gain? Discipline-specific knowledge, but in both cases, the skills and the knowledge should be somehow relevant to the student's long-term experience. How will this matter in their lives after graduation? So we're looking just for purpose, just for skills and knowledge. And maybe you could raise your hand or type a comment when the purpose jumps right out at you, when you feel like you've identified what are the skills and what are the knowledge in this coming assignment. Just give us an indicator, and then when we have enough indicators, we'll start to hear from you. We'll have you tell us. So here is the assignment itself. We're looking only for purpose, skills, and knowledge.
Okay, so someone is saying skills interviewing.
Good. That's good.
Yeah,
Okay.
and there are a lot of people who are not using video, so it's easier for me to see comments that are going into the chat.
Okay.
So the first one is skills in interviewing, gather information to make an informed career decision.
Those are good.
Then number 4 was purpose.
That's good. So interviewing skills, that was the first one that showed up. That actually has a whole lot of sub-skills involved there. Yes, over on the knowledge side, I see this popped up. We have knowledge of professional practice and field. Okay, that's the knowledge piece that would be relevant if this was something the student cared about. So coming back to the skills side, we've got 2 big skill sets here. Can we break those down a little bit more in terms of what skills would the student really practice in doing this? So interviewing skills, that involves a whole lot of separate skills. Like, let's hear some of those. Oral and written, organization, oral communication, good. Written communication, all right, now we're up to 6, please. Listening, good. Designing questions for interviews and asking those questions. Interpersonal skills, yes, huge. Pursuing need, right, a follow-up question. All right, so now we're up to, I think, 11 skills. Now, if this is indeed, and I'll tell you that it is, because I know it is, this is a early in the term, first-year communications course. It is probably not the case that the teacher intends for the students to be focusing on 11 separate skills in this early semester assignment in an intro level course. So if you had to, could you pinpoint what are maybe the 1 or 2 most important skills that the teacher consciously wants the student to be focusing on and practicing while doing this assignment? Assuming that they don't really mean for the student to be focusing simultaneously on 11 skills. Can you tell from looking at this assignment what might be the top 2 skills?
Well, I'll just, I'll just jump in and say, even figuring out what a professional is in your prospective academic discipline, I mean, even knowing how to choose the person you would go after in the first place. Somebody said that that's a stopper for me if I don't have any clue about the world in which I'm finding professionals.
And these are exactly the kinds of perceptions that we hear from faculty around the country when we show them assignments like this, and this one in particular. And I use this one because it is such a good example of a not transparent assignment. It is such a good example of an assignment that will privilege those students who get what it means to be in college, who understand how to do an intro level course assignment, who talk to people in their family who have done assignments like this. And it is a completely unfair and untransparent assignment for the new incoming majority student in college, who is either first generation or underrepresented or underserved or low income, right? So this is a good example, and you've seen sort of what it is that faculty grapple with then when they walk through this training experience, this workshop experience. And then I ask them to we look at a number of assignments, and then toward the end of the whole group togetherness part of the workshop, we'll ask them, and you can ask them in these slides, to look at a final sample, to think about a purpose statement on an assignment that was already labeled by us as a more transparent assignment. This was